Hello, you're watching The Big Story with me, Chiao Suen. Subscribe to the Straits Times channel to stay up to date with our live news updates. Singapore's economic recovery from the pandemic is benefiting fresh graduates, as more of them secured full-time jobs with higher pay in 2022. The median salary for fresh graduates in permanent jobs went up from $3,800 in 2021 to $4,200 in 2022. The increases were most significant among those who graduated from information and digital technologies courses, as their gross monthly salaries increased from $5,000 to $5,625 in 2022. Despite the increase in the number of graduates finding full-time jobs, there was an increase in those who remained jobless 6 months after leaving school, with employment rates dropping from 94.4% in 2021 to 93.8% in 2022. The proportion of graduates in part-time or temporary employment also dropped from 8.7% to 4.5%. I'm now joined by ST's education correspondent, Amelia Teng. Thanks for joining us today, Amelia. So, with the median salaries for university graduates increasing, is the key to finding a well-paying job dependent on having a degree? Or is the route that someone like Edwin To, who landed a position at Google with a polytechnic diploma and some work experience, still viable towards getting a well-paid job?
So I think if we're comparing the median salaries of university graduates and poly grads side by side, then yes, I think it seems that uni grads still command a wage premium. It's 4,200 in 2022 compared to 2,600 for poly grads. So that's quite a substantial difference. But wages are really a function of demand and supply and how much society and employers value certain skills. So I think if such a wide gap continues to persist, then it's telling of an economy that places quite a lot or too much emphasis on degree qualifications and the supposed cognitive abilities that come along with it rather than actual skills, some of which may be more practical or more vocational. So in recent years, there have been some efforts to help poly and ITE graduates to upskill without necessarily getting a university degree through things like work-study programs that will help these graduates get a pay rise after the program. But of course, to a young person, the substantial wage premium that a university degree offers may still be more enticing. So examples like Edwin To, I think it tells you that it is possible to succeed or to do well without getting a degree, but you really need to work hard at what you do and have relevant experience in what you want to pursue. So this means, I guess, not just going for a general university degree that doesn't offer you what is relevant, but spending those 3 to 4 years instead getting real-world knowledge and expertise, perhaps on internships like what he did, work attachments in different companies, and then building up through all of that a strong portfolio. And not to say that qualifications are not important, but there are alternatives to a full-time degree nowadays, like different types of diplomas, specialist technical diplomas, or even professional certificates and online courses.
Now, speaking of demand and supply and employment, unemployment rates among university graduates also went up last year. What do you think could be the cause of that? Is it a weak job market, fresh graduates being more picky, or just the lack of employability of graduates?
So according to experts that I've spoken to, the slight increase in unemployment among fresh university graduates is not very worrying because if you take into account the broader global outlook, so this went up to 6.2% in 2022. But observers say that the prospects for graduates are still bright with more job opportunities being created, with Singapore opening up and economic activities going back to normal. Also, some graduates may actually be a bit more picky, given the how Singapore is doing better and can afford to wait for job roles that they think are more suitable for them.
Now, I thought it was quite interesting that the tech sector seems to have the highest take-home pay despite the recent layoffs that have plagued the industry. Why is this so?
So, I mean, media tends to play a big part in highlighting the side about job cuts in the tech sector. I guess it makes for more sexy headlines than hiring jobs. But according to observers, actually tech graduates are still in demand despite all the recent job losses in the sector. And the reality is that this is taking place concurrently with job hiring on a wider scale. It's just that it's not like on a frenzy like what we saw during the COVID-19 pandemic. And hiring is also still taking place in not just the tech sector, but tech roles in almost every industry, whether it's financial services or the startup space, to healthcare, aerospace, and travel, as all these sectors open up. So tech is not just limited to the tech industry alone.
Thank you for your very valuable insights, Amelia. This has been ST's education correspondent, Amelia Tang. Have you ever spotted a wild boar in Singapore? Well, encountering one may be less surprising in the years to come. Wild boars have naturally recolonized most of the viable green spaces in Singapore, and the population looks likely to continue growing. A recent study which involved researchers from more than 10 organizations, including the National University of Singapore, showed that population growth comes as an abundance of food sources, the absence of predators, and a complete ban on hunting in Singapore. Dr. Adrian Liu, Group Director, Wildlife Management of N Parks, tells us more about what the organization is doing to control the wild boar population in Singapore.
And this is actually, in a way, partly due to, one of our strategies in managing the wild boar populations. So this would be reduction of the oil palm plantations. So this reduces the food that is extra for the wild boars, and this actually helps to reduce the densities. Another thing that we do is really enforce against feeders as well. So this also reduces the density, and we do enforce against feeders because this can be quite a big source of food for them as well. Yeah, so it's a combination of habitat modification as well as enforcement against feeding.
Dr. Matthew Laskin, who heads the Ecological Cascades Lab in the School of Biological Sciences in the University of Queensland and co-authored the study, joins us now. Thanks for joining us today, Dr. Laskin. So, what is the impact of an overpopulation of wild boars? With an increase in population, I assume that would mean increased possibility of contact between humans and the animals?
Yes, our new paper with NParks describes how wild boars were completely eliminated from Singapore and then recolonized and have been expanding over the last 20 years. However, right now, we do not consider them overpopulated, but we're monitoring their populations closely. Most interactions with pigs are actually beneficial, such as when a hiker can spot a wild boar and feels a connection to nature. Pigs are rarely aggressive. However, sometimes they are involved in vehicle collisions.
So how do we then balance between the need for wildlife preservation, like you said, the pleasurable experience of a hiker, versus the safety of the human population?
Wildlife and humans already coexist peacefully in Singapore, much more than other areas. This is largely due to the lack of large, dangerous animals in Singapore. For example, we don't have tigers remaining. And there's also a ban on hunting in Singapore. So you don't get a lot of conflict between these animals and people. But to ensure interactions with large wildlife, especially wild boar, remain beneficial, the most important thing is to give them space if you see them, and also avoid feeding. A lot of people have want to do something good by feeding wildlife, but this is actually really negative. It creates bad habits. It creates wildlife becoming habituated to humans, being near them, and potentially having a negative interaction. So the most important thing is to avoid feeding wildlife.
So you're also working on a study on the African swine fever and mentioned that it could keep the wild boar numbers here under control, but could also decimate their population. What is the threat of the African swine fever? Are there any possibilities of transmission to humans?
Right, well, let me start by saying the disease causes no threat to humans at all. It's strictly a pig disease. That being said, it is very deadly for pigs. So African swine fever has already decimated populations of wild pigs in Southeast Asia since 2021. In some places, this really threatens conservation or even extinction for the other 10 endemic pig species in the region. Its delayed arrival in Singapore is really surprising, but now that it's here and people have detected African swine fever in pig carcasses on the island, we think the outcomes will likely be similar to other nearby forests. For example, in my last trip to a large forest in peninsular Malaysia, I had seen that the pigs had killed over the disease killed over 90% of the pigs within 2 months. Now, this is not cause for too much concern because populations of wildlife fluctuate naturally anyway, and pigs have the ability to reproduce very quickly, and so may rebound in the future. But for the next few months, we're going to be monitoring this situation very closely.
Thank you for your very interesting insight. This has been Dr. Matthew Luskin, University of Queensland.
Thank you for having me.
And those are our top stories for today. Visit straitstimes.com for more news and our YouTube channel for more videos. Subscribe by hitting the red button below. I'm Chao Suen, and I'll see you tomorrow on The Big Story.